Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, presented by Caddle, Season 4, Episode 29. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
On this episode, our guest is a friend of the pod, Colleen Martin from Caddle, back with her for her regular visit with fresh-baked proprietary research exclusive to the Food Professor Podcast. And speaking of baked, we're celebrating 420, the 420 holiday with proprietary consumer research on retail cannabis. The state of consumer preferences beyond devil's lettuce, and true to the show, we're specifically looking at consumer preferences around edibles.
Yeah, no, it should be an interesting conversation with Colleen. They have up-to-date data. Cannabis, let's face it, it's a work in progress in Canada. It is legal. It was legalized a few years ago, but is it really? Are people consuming more or less? We'll find out.
Well, and we were particularly interested about edibles because historically, whatever historically means, even looking at the States, flower accounts for about 50% of what people enjoy, and then the rest was some kind of alternative or edible or tincture or whatever. So we're going to get an update from Colleen on that. We were curious, and of course,
and we're a food show, so we have to focus on edibles, of course.
Right. Yeah. So it just all makes sense. So let's pop a couple of gummies and get on with the show. It's a busy show.
CBD gummies.
It's not a bong show. We got to get going. That's a Tony Chapman joke, by the way. Shout out to Tony Chapman and his great pod. Let's get into the news. Let's start with the federal budget. So. Budget came out 2 days ago. It was an interesting budget cycle. We talked about this last episode because it was well marketed well in advance. It's a very different thing. Usually it's a big secret, but I saw some notes from different associations, farmers, that they were both disappointed and optimistic. But, I see some wins. I see some wins on rebates and the carbon tax. I see some stuff for the restaurant sector. And again, I didn't see any grocery windfall tax. But let's step back. What were your thoughts on the budget in the context of the food and agricultural sector?
Yeah, so it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, to be honest. Frankly, my expectations weren't very high. But I was actually quite pleased with the carbon reimbursement. That's what it is, really. So since 2019, Ottawa has been collecting the carbon tax from small businesses, and small businesses need all the help they can get. And I'm thinking about farmers, restaurants, all small agri-food processors out there. I mean, they need all the help they can get. So I was actually, and as you know, Michael, last fall, I did recommend to the Finance Committee that we should pause on a carbon tax. Well, it was even better. I mean, we're basically giving that money back. But it does beg the question about the policy itself. I mean, we're reimbursing consumers, we're reimbursing businesses. We're not measuring
where does that money go anyway?
I know. And we're not even measuring the impact of the carbon tax on climate. I mean, we're not even trying. And so I do wonder, why do we have this policy in the first place now? So that's one question. The other big, huge disappointment is on infrastructure. I know it's not a popular theme. Nobody talks about that because, I think the capital tax actually got a lot of attention yesterday. But when I saw the $4.6 billion to be invested in infrastructure for trades, I thought, oh my God, it's so underwhelming, and we need way more. We need way more investments. And so in that regards, I think that's probably why farmers were very disappointed, and I was very disappointed in that. The food program, I wrote an op-ed earlier this week. I honestly think it should be part of the ag policy piece that we have in Canada, the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture or Agri-Food Policy. It's worth $3.5 billion over 5 years. And the reason why the Farm Bill in the U.S. is worth $1.4 trillion, and we spoke about this last week, is because they actually look at the nexus between supply and demand, both domestically and internationally. In Canada, it's a piecemeal of different things. We want to feed our kids. Let's actually do this. We want to do this. Well, let's do that. There's no cohesion. There's no vision for the agri-food sector. And that's really what's missing in my view. But like I said, my expectation was very low. So what were your thoughts about the budget?
Well, it was similar. I mean, there's a lot of course, I've been through many of these budgets as an advocate as well, and there's many calls on the public purse, so to speak. Lots of people are either disappointed, happy, or somewhere in between.
Yeah. Restaurants Canada appeared to be happy.
Yeah, they appeared to be happy. I mean, people are either happy or sad because they didn't get enough money, or they felt put upon by different structural tax things like capital taxes and stuff like that. Yeah. I think that leaves opportunity in this budget. I mean, it's a big run up to the election budget. There's probably another budget in the hopper before the writ drops. But I thought it was an opportunity, if not lost.
So you think this budget is going to pass?
Oh yeah, I think the budget will pass because not to get political, not political podcast, but I mean the reason the Liberals are talking about building more rental units isn't because millennials want to live in rental units, because the NDP people who vote for the NDP live in rental units, and
frankly, the housing focus is absolutely appropriate and
very much
critical because I mean we're looking at the food numbers. I mean, people are hurting out there. They have less money to spend on food.
Yeah,
because of shelter.
I think the government's finally getting it in and then executing on messaging that says we see that there's a housing crisis, we see that there's an affordability crisis. We see some of that reflected in here. I mean, in the world of things that I'm disappointed about, disappointed is actually a bit of a strong word, but my overarching concern, and this goes back to our discussion last episode, we've talked about it over the years, is this, as you say, a cohesive agricultural policy that makes sure that we're maximizing all the wonderful assets of our country and at the same time feeding our people and doing all those things together. I mean, where is the opportunity to have, we've talked about it, a food stamp type program. You've come up with ideas. I don't see that anywhere. That's an innovative idea. We could use an innovative idea in this country right now. So I'm bereft of finding innovation.
Well, for agri-tech, for agri-tech, I mean, it's pretty simple. If you're not implementing something that has to do with the environment, you're on your own. Because I mean, there is some money.
Or AI. There's some funding for AI, which is good.
Which is absolutely good. Yeah. So the focus on AI was very, very important, and as far as I'm concerned. But the thing is that can we actually give ourselves a more productive economy as a result of this budget? And unless you see it, I don't see it at all.
Yeah, I don't see in this budget a growth. It's not a growth budget, and let's talk about not the elephant in the room, but the whatever in the room, which is productivity. And we've talked about it, and you seem to have ignited a fair bit of views with hundreds of thousands of views when you posted
over
a chart,
500,000
views on X, where you posted a chart that showed growth in federal employees during the Trudeau era. Now, if you went back another 20, 30, 40 years, we've actually back to where it was probably where his father
Trudeau
was.
Father,
actually.
yeah.
It kind of went down during Mulrooney and because, Mulrooney privatized a bunch of stuff, right? CN, Air Canada. Yep. Remember, back in the days, they were government employees, right? They were
exactly.
crown corporations. But, what I find is that opportunity. Now, let's talk about those numbers a little bit, because I asked you specifically, again, not about you're an economist, so you're thinking about overall productivity. But when we were talking, even last episode the episode before about there's just not enough inspectors, it seems, in the CFIA. There's 9,000 of them. Could we use more? And could we use more federal employees? And you would know that federal employees increase due to everything from immigration. I mean, if you're going to bring in 2 million people, somebody's got to vet those 2 million people. Somebody's got to get their passports. Somebody's got to handle the CERB, and somebody had to handle all that stuff out of COVID. So you could pick apart that growth in a number of different ways. But ultimately, what I'm curious from you for this pod is where you think, are we overstaffed and understaffed from a food sector perspective from a federal government, if at all?
Well, no, it's a great question, and frankly, when I saw my posts go viral, I kind of repost a question. I mean, what is the optimal size of government? I mean, I think it's a fair question that we should all ask ourselves. And
we're not that far off. You posted what was it, that Canada, there's a federal employee for every 110 citizens, and in the U.S. it's 150.
It's 150, yeah, at the federal level.
I thought that was pretty close, actually. I thought that'd be much.
Oh, you thought it was actually farther. You thought it was.
I thought it would have been farther. America's land of the, the free enterprise. But So
basically, we do have. We need to recognize that we have currently a government that is nationalizing a lot of programs. I mean, think of daycare, pharmacare, the school program. You need people. And so I don't really, I mean, the question about optimizing the public service has nothing to do with a number. It has everything to do with the vision that the government should have. I mean, right now, like, I wouldn't be surprised to see the government increase even more and to support some of these programs. And you need the people to support those kinds of programs. The problem is that in the budget yesterday, I don't know if you saw that, but they've promised to decrease the public service by 5,000 while nationalizing all of these programs like daycare. And
they probably do it through attrition, though, like some civil service. You know, the numbers are so big, all they have to do is stop filling some posts on different files.
That's how government actually does. I mean, Harper actually did exactly that. I mean, but it was pretty devastating. I do work with the CFI quite a bit, go to meetings, and I got to tell you, one day I walked into the CFI and all the desks on one floor were empty, like all the desks. That was pre-COVID. And it was just, wow. You saw the Harper years were really hard on the public service. But since then, I think we were all expecting Trudeau to be much friendlier to the public service. But right now, when you look at agri-food related departments, what is really interesting is that I'd say for the most part, they're pretty average. They've actually hired some people, but you can tell like Agri-Food Canada is not even at the level that it was in 2015. So, and also the one agri-food related agency that has actually increased the most is the Canadian Dairy Commission, and the Canadian Dairy Commission the Canadian Dairy Commission oversees the dairy sector, and we're drinking less milk in Canada.
Okay, so there's an opportunity right there, right? So, you know, as we go through this, as you say, I think it's a great discussion because you can make judgments about. Because I saw some of the reaction is like, oh my God, Trudeau's got to go. It
was pretty intense.
But it's really taking a data point completely out of context.
Well, the CRA, to me, the CRA is an extreme case that perhaps we're hiring too much. So in the last 2 years,
they ran the COVID program.
So people may argue it's about revenue. That's a good thing. Well, look at the numbers. So yesterday, what we saw was an increase of 7% of the government revenue in the last year. Over 2 years, I think it's about 13%. So over 2 years. So the CRA has actually increased the number of employees by 25% in the last 2 years. So are we going to get, is that the ROI? Are we going to get more revenue? I don't know. But something is going on.
You turn them into tax farmers, basically.
Tax farmers, yeah.
Right? More people go out and get more owed tax. By the way, I want it on record that I love the CRA and all the people that work there. So
yes, absolutely, especially right now.
I love them all.
Right now, yes, we love you.
I love them all. All right, well, let's leave that there. I mean, that's a very interesting discussion. Globally, are we over? And there's also some download of responsibilities to the provinces and some funding. So if we took all government employees into one. I mean, heck, you go to Quebec and government employees are selling cannabis. So, there you go.
CFIA, in terms of the number of employees, I think the Trudeau years have been actually quite friendly to the CFIA. Okay. Health Canada, same thing. So, I mean, I train future bureaucrats. I mean, future public servants. It's hard for me to say, oh my God, our public service is too big. I mean, I believe in the role of the state, and you need a strong government. And I know a lot of people will send me nasty emails because I just said that, but that's my bias.
Let's talk about the CPI numbers that came out. It was a busy week this week. CPI numbers came out, and it looks like food inflation continues to moderate. From my reading of it, gas and accommodation increase is really made up for.
Actually, with food inflation, an hour before it was posted, I said 2%. It was 1.9%, so I was pretty close.
pretty close. That's very close. Yeah. So you must be. I mean, you weren't surprised. You must be. You predicted this in your report.
My concern is core inflation. To be honest, I mean, I think we spoke about this a few weeks ago. I actually, a lot of people are speculating that in June we'll see a rate drop. I don't know, man. Like seriously, I'm looking at the Fed in the U.S. I'm looking at the core inflation rate here. The economy is boiling in the U.S. If we're lucky if we get a hold in June, I'll be honest. And so a few reporters I was talking to today asked me, well, what do we need to do to help people? Well, it's not going to be at the grocery store. It's going to be with shelter. It's going to be with debt. That's where it's hurting right now.
Let's move on from economic matters and let's get to breakfast. So you're releasing some great results. Are you a breakfast kind of person? If I have a breakfast, shout out to Burnbury Eggs and Margaret Hudson. I saw her a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about eggs. We were having some eggs between us, actually. Yeah, I love a good huevos rancheros or a good egg for breakfast, but more on the weekend than during the week. What's your breakfast habit?
Well, I train in the morning, so I frankly like to run or do whatever I need to do on an empty stomach. To be honest, my metabolism is incredibly slow, so it depends. Most of the time, I do eat breakfast, but midway through the morning.
Oh, I see.
But coffee is a must right after I get up for sure. The reason why we wanted to release this study about breakfast is that we've been talking about breakfasts for kids in school, and we thought, well, what about adulthood? I mean, what do people actually do when they grow up with breakfast? Is breakfast still the most important meal of the day?
57.2% of Canadians eat breakfast every day. Newfoundland and Labrador leads the country at 69%, and BC at 52%. Maybe they're all up training. They're all those outdoorsy type people. And then the survey, very interesting survey. Of course, this is Caddle did this survey for you, and you surveyed a big, huge. I mean, it's not surprising because it's a pretty broad subject. 9,165 Canadians. So this is very definitive. So if you're a brand listening to this podcast, get all over this research. When you talk to 9,000 people, it's pretty definitive.
Yeah, exactly.
You broke it down by the generations, Gen Z.
Yeah, the generational differences are pretty interesting. And don't you think?
Well, I think it's lifestyle more than generation. I mean, if you're Gen Z, you're on the go, you're doing whatever, 48%. If you're greatest generation.
It's the snacking generation. Yeah, absolutely. And the 3-meal institution is kind of fading away with the younger crowd.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the greatest gen, which for demographics is kind of like the folks who would be very, very senior. Well, what the hell else they got to do? They're going to sit around and have breakfast every day.
Come on. They have tons of stuff to do.
Well, they do, but they also have time for breakfast. They don't have to catch the subway to get into work, right? So that didn't really...
I just wrote a piece for a magazine for the elderly. It's coffee, toast, and they're good to go. That's 81% of that population, but kids, they're different. Absolutely. And the food industry will have to adapt. It is adapting, of course, but the 24-hour breakfast is not going to go away. I think we're going to continue to see more chains offering breakfast all day long. Absolutely. And breakfast is the cheapest meal of the day.
Yeah. And very nutritious. Like you can't, it's hard to get more nutrition than packed into an egg, right? Eggs are very nutritious. Not a significant difference in gender, but what...
is Burnbury paying us now, or...
I just said eggs. I didn't say them. I just said eggs. And they're not, by the way, just so we're clear.
Exactly.
We are not that we wouldn't take their money, by the way. So, Margaret, if you're listening, feel free. What people eat for breakfast. So, take us down the list. What number one thing people eat for breakfast?
Toast and bagels.
Yeah. Toast or bagels. Number 2, eggs.
Yeah,
with a protein source. Did you actually ask people with a protein source? That sounds like
no, because it was bacon, sausage, whatever, and it does vary, of course. And a lot of people do eat breakfast at home. It's not like you're at the restaurant. So
cold pizza comes in at 6%. I see that. Actually, you asked leftovers from dinner, but I'm assuming that's
from dinner. 6%. That was funny, pizza. Isn't it? Like, how many people do you know that eat breakfast using last night's leftovers, really?
Well, I did today, actually. I was
thinking like college kids or something, but you're a college kid.
I had breakfast a little later, so I had some pasta for breakfast, I guess. Anyway, so all right, well, great research. We'll put a link to it in the show
just so
notes.
you know, I mean, did you see the coffee differences between generations?
No, tell me.
I was shocked. So, greatest generation, boomers, drink a lot of coffee. As when you get young, oh my goodness, it's 30%. It's very low. So it means that's the pumpkin spice generation. You know, I actually was having a debate with a Gen Z the other day, and I said, and she said,
"I'm sorry to hear that.
Pumpkin spice, that's coffee, isn't it?"
Oh my God!
And then I said, "No, I'm sorry, it's liquid candy."
Boy, I have to ask you if that's a stage of life or a generational change. Because if it's a generational change, the coffee business is in big trouble. But if it's just a change of lifestyle,
listen,
what do you think?
I taught to about 60 kids this spring, 4-year class. And I don't know if you remember your days at the University of McGill. Were you drinking coffee when you were a student?
Yeah, absolutely.
And most people did too, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, well, today that's not the case at all. But
didn't have Red Bull when I was going.
Yeah, so I actually did ask the question. About 20% of my students actually drank coffee.
Let's leave that there, and in fact, let's get to our chitting and chatting with Colleen for her regular drop in. Let's dim the lights, chill the ham, and have a conversation about cannabis for 420. Colleen, welcome back for your regular appearance here, friend of the pod. Welcome back to Food Professor. How are you?
Thank you. Yes, I'm great. Thanks for having me again.
Hey, Colleen.
Listen, thanks for being on. As we were telling our audience at the beginning of the show, it's 420 coming up in a day or two, so we're celebrating all things devil's lettuce and cannabis, and
that's right.
And
especially Michael. Michael celebrates a lot.
So we asked you to go out, you being Caddle, to go out and do a bit of research and particularly focus on edibles and what's happening in the market. Are people going up, down, or sideways? What kind of edibles they like? So you've produced for us some proprietary information. So why don't you, first of all, start telling the people about how you got the information and how you go and collect this information specifically, and then let's take us through it. Take us through what you found.
Sounds good. We work with a lot of cannabis brands, so we do have a very well-developed audience on our panel of people who consume cannabis in different forms, THC, CBD only, etc. What we did here was run a couple of daily surveys, a couple in March, and then some later in the results referred to a couple months previous. But essentially, this goes out to our daily panel. And of those cannabis consumers, we would focus it down and ask questions for the people who are specifically exhibiting the behavior that we want to ask them questions about. So if you're not a cannabis user, then we exclude you from the results, and then we only focus on the people that do consume. So this March, in honor of 420, we did ask some folks a couple of weeks ago, I guess, oh my gosh, it's already the 17th of April. So a couple of weeks ago, we asked some about 1,900 and change panel members about these are cannabis users, what their usage, like has their usage increased, remained the same, or decreased? And we found that almost 20%, 19% of people say that their usage have increased in the past 12 months. 62% said it remained the same, and the same 19% say their consumption has decreased.
So before we get too shocked, I guess it's up and down, which kind of nets to be about the same. And of course, when we're talking about this, do you make the distinction when you ask the question legal versus black market? I guess do you make that distinction in the way you ask the question, or is this all consumption? You can.
We can, and we do. We have worked with certain cannabis brands to understand the scope and extent of the black market ongoing, like how much of it is being purchased through black versus licensed
legal.
and retail. Yeah, legal.
Illegal.
And
illegal and legal.
Illegal versus legal.
Call it what it is. Yeah.
And we do ask those questions, but not in this viewpoint. We're just not trying to understand, in the scope of this discussion, edibles, beverages, what people's preferences are, flavors, things like that. So we've got some cool information for you there.
Sylvain, when you think about edibles and cannabis, I think I'm of two minds. One is as you and I've talked before, that edibles kind of got off to a slow start because the government really wanted them to not be very potent because they were worried about, kids getting a hold of it, or they just wanted people to adjust. But at the same time, edibles has a lot to do with flavor. So how do you square the circle in these two things? In other words, if I'm going to buy a cannabis drink product, I'm going to buy it from a retail cannabis place. I don't know what somebody's making up in their basement and serving me cannabis. But people do say, listen, with the 10 milligrams, it doesn't really have that kind of impact that they'd like. How do you think about squaring those two things? And what's been your observation over the past couple of years?
Well, I mean, basically, because of the Cannabis Act, I'm not sure the food industry or anyone out there has been pushed to think about flavors and marketing. I mean, let's face it, the Cannabis Act is very restrictive from a marketing perspective, from anything. And so the edible market is still immature, incredibly immature in Canada. And so what you're talking about is Cannabis Act 2.0, probably 3.0, because right now, as you know, the act itself is under revision because it's close to 5 years now, and we don't know exactly what to expect. But we have actually submitted a report asking the act to be more, I would say, lenient towards licensing of plants for edibles. I mean, because right now, it's just so restrictive. You have to build a $15-20 million plant before you even get you receive a license from Health Canada. So that's why your question about the illicit market is quite relevant for edibles in particular, because we still believe it's quite big out there.
Now, for context, Colleen, since you do some work in this space, my understanding historically over the past couple of years has been that flower is about 50% of the market, and edibles and other alternatives, tinctures or whatever, the other 50%. You didn't specifically ask this in this survey, but is that still your sense of how people consume? There's actually a little bit in here because you talk about rolling joints or pre-rolls, which are quite popular here. But talk about that for a little bit.
If this data here, we asked when you do use cannabis products, what's your preferred consumption method? Out of the same group of people, 25% of people prefer edibles. And, the roll, pre-roll, vape pen, vaporizer kind of go in that top 5, and beverage comes in at 6%. Now, the work that we're doing, proprietary work we're doing with cannabis brands, beverages are difficult because the taste is a little wonky there with the THC or CBD additive.
Can be, yeah.
So there's a lot of movement in terms of loyalty and trying. People are pretty brand promiscuous at this stage. But the beverages, because of the early products to the market, weren't very nice tasting. So they're having a problem with adoption there. But edibles are are the most popular way to consume.
I think that's a big change, right, Sylvain? Because when I roll up the numbers, get it? What I'm doing here, when I roll up the numbers between pre-roll and roll your own joint, I get 24% versus edible 25%, and there's obviously a bunch of other things, but I was kind of shocked about that. Like if joints only are a quarter of the business, that means the edibles have really starting to take a bit of sway, more than I would have anticipated. Did that surprise you, Sylvain?
No, not at all. I mean, it's pretty simple. The body is not designed to inhale drugs. It is designed to ingest drugs. And you saw that. We're seeing that in the U.S. as the cannabis market matures. You do see this shift towards more edibles. But right now in Canada, I don't think we have the laws in place to allow the market to naturally make that shift. It's going to take a while. And so, and I did see the edible market as a tremendous opportunity for the food industry. But right now, I would say that most manufacturers, most companies have just said, you know what, we're gonna wait on the sidelines for a while until things become a little bit looser.
So, Colleen, let's go through some numbers, because I found them really interesting. Gummies rule, but at the same time, from a beverage perspective, I was a bit surprised. So, take us through some of the numbers that you found, both in the daily and some of the research you did with us, just so we can lay the groundwork. And we'll put a link in the show notes to this on your site because this is proprietary, right? So people can go look at look at them.
You can download the results.
Right on.
We can help you suss out some of the finer details regarding demographics. Absolutely. So back in December, we asked about 1,800 people, what type of cannabis edibles would you like to purchase? Would you like to see, right? Because you've got markets like California that are very well developed, lots of different types, lots of flavors, lots of, like partnering with brands and, a CBD Coca-Cola type thing is in the works in the US because of how far down the path they are in certain states.
So not so much in the say province of Quebec, for example, which is pretty yeah.
But the wish list, and this is a select all that apply. So we listed these things and people selected everything that they'd be interested in purchasing. Gummies was number one at 42.1. And that is reflective of its popularity and its ability it's a 5 milligram. It's very easily to dose, and the accuracy is quite good, and the repeatability is quite good with the gummy. Chocolate is 2 at 24.4, cookies 20.3%, brownies 20%, caramel chews, mints, gum, all in that 11 to 12% range. Cereal bars or like a protein bar, 10.2%, and lozenges. All other is 39.8. I'd love to know what those others are because that pretty much is a very exhaustive list of everything you put in your mouth to consume THC. Yeah. But it's the demand is there for
maybe people would
variety.
Think about squares and muffins.
I know there was a big push for a while on taking non-alcoholic wine or beer and infusing them with cannabis because you'd get, depending on how much cannabis you'd infuse with it, relatively speaking, you could get the social benefits of drinking an alcohol flavored like product, or you can, go do whatever. But I didn't really see it come up. Like carbonated really rules, right? Carbonated coffee and tea. So does
when
that
we
surprise
talk about beverages, not at all. Like when you talk about the beverages that people have purchased in the last 3 months, again, this is select all that apply, a sample of 1,542 that was asked in February, 27.2% say carbonated drinks. Because again, like you're saying, Michael, like in a social situation, if you're looking at a vodka soda type situation, then a carbonated drink is perfect for that event, right? And as we know, if you've ever tried a non-alcoholic wine, not great, lackluster. So it's really hard to mess up a vodka soda type drink. But as we saw in what their preferences are, 6% of people only are interested in those beverages. So out of that 6%, this is how it rolls in terms of the formatting. So coffee is second at 19.6, tea at 17.9, drink mixes. So I'm assuming like a margarita mix or a mule or something like that would be
ready
at
to drink,
ready to drink. And then non-carbonated drinks like a water, like there's a lot of work in the US going on right now in terms of CBD water, which has benefits. And other at 36.
The two main cannabinoids are THC and CBD, and I've always believed, like for the beverage industry, CBD actually has a lot of potential. Is massive. Did you actually look into that, separating both cannabinoids and see what product would actually fit better with either one?
We can do that. Absolutely. We do a lot of studies that break out non-psychoactive and psychoactive cannabinoids to understand, because the larger market, the total serviceable market for a CBD product is much, 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 much larger than a THC. So when you think about health and wellness and inflammation reduction and mood stabilizing, like CBD has a lot of great benefits, not only for humans, but also for animals. So when you think of the size of that market, that's where, the Coca-Colas and the Canagras and the big companies are looking at how do they incorporate or even blow out and expand into categories that are in a wellness angle with a regulated CBD additive.
In terms of research, now, have you how many times in the last 5 years have you dug into the cannabis space, and have you seen any progress that is noteworthy?
A lot of the research we have done in this space is regarding real estate placement. So we do work with Environics, and we do work with their, like, where do you put stores? So we do a lot of work around, how far people will drive. And we do have a question in here about asking where they shop in retail for cannabis and where do they prefer. And, 46% say the place that they normally go. And only 19% of people say they would go to a new store. So this has changed a lot because there was a lot of brand promiscuity as people were kind of understanding, it's when you go into these stores, the assortment's always changing. You're getting something different all the time. The core part of the assortment is very variable. Like you go in, there's new drinks all the time because the market is expanding so quickly. So it's kind of, once you find a place that's reliable and has the stuff that you like, rather it being gone the next week because there's some new product, people will go back. So we're starting to see a little bit of stabilization, and there's so many stores out there now. If you're into Fire and Flower, you're going to go to that Fire and Flower that's, within 2 kilometers of your home all the time, if that's what you want to do. And, we didn't address online here, but online's a very large portion of the market as well. I would not want to, it's a very tumultuous and fragmented and confusing space right now. If you're a retailer and if you're a brand and if you're an LP, right? Like there's so much change, and yet it's going so slowly in terms of what they can do with the consumer, that it's just a very volatile space to be in right now as a business owner.
Well, I think to your point, Sylvain, it's less volatile in provinces like Nova Scotia, where the province owns the distribution. Their focus, as in talking to them and spending time in their stores, is the customer experience, like the shopping experience, because they are not dealing with the same kind of dynamics, just like in the province of Quebec, right? They own the distribution. Other places are way more dynamic. Ontario, for example, to a degree, and many of the other provinces. So anyway, very interesting.
Listen, Colleen, great insight, great report, very timely. It's 420 is happening this weekend, so I think a lot of people will have a very interesting weekend indeed. Thank you for joining us today, Colleen.
Thank you so much. I love joining you guys every month. It's a highlight.
We're back. Everybody celebrating.
Great conversation with Colleen.
As always, so every month we're going to be asking her to go and for Caddle do some proprietary research for us. So so that's the results. Available only if you're listening to the Food Professor podcast. All right, last couple of things. I want to talk about survival food kits. So on the one hand,
you saw that in the news.
Yeah. I did. I'm a big fan of those, by the way. Like, do you have a go bag? A go bag at home?
No.
Like suddenly there's a flood or a zombie apocalypse or something happens and
seriously, come on. Oh, you're in Mississauga, so
anything could happen here, my friend.
A plane can crash on your backyard anytime, but you're ready. You got 5 barbecues or something.
Well, they're a little hard to take. I got lots of craft dinner though. But Costco, in this case, was selling these. Basically, they're MREs, meals ready to eat that the military uses. Last forever, nutritious. I think it's fundamentally a good idea to have. I've got a box of that or a case of that stuff. It lasts for 20 years, and like the government in a big crisis, it takes a while for the government to react, and I think it's a good idea. What do you think?
I don't know. Like I got grass and got rabbits in the backyard, so I'm good to go.
You can't smoke marijuana though. You're way to peace.
No, that's right. Exactly. Anyway. No, listen. I actually.
No, like if you got to go, like you live in a place where there's. But
a few years ago, we did survey Canadians, not with Caddle. I think it was with Angus Reid, and we did ask the question about survival kits because they were. For many years, there were rumors about a pandemic, which eventually happened, of course.
Yeah, and there'll be another one, by the way.
Yeah, in those days, of course, we were encouraging people to actually have food for at least 3 days.
Sure.
And so we actually estimated that 5 to 7% of households do have a survival food kit of some sort to help them go through 3 to 5 days at the very least. So there is a market for that.
And I would bet that market is opened up. That's because of access. I mean, right now, without Costco, I would not know where to go get such a thing, right? Like an army surplus store. Like Costco is a big democratizer of these big products like that, just like gold bars, right? Costco decided to sell gold bars North America?
I don't see it that way. I actually see it from a demand side. I mean, consumers have actually embraced this so-called risk society. I mean, we close schools when there's an eclipse, for goodness sake. I mean, that's what happened in Montreal last week. That we've canceled Halloween. I mean, you can feel that people manage risk very differently, and they want to be prepared. And so I think that the psyche around preparedness has actually completely changed due to how we perceive risk and how we manage them as well. So I think you're right. Absolutely. I think Costco is the perfect retailer for that kind of stuff, but other retailers have actually sold similar kits. If people feel more prepared buying these things, well, power to them. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I was stocking up on stuff back in 1999, if you remember the coming crisis.
But you can actually buy, and I could see you do it, you could actually buy a skid for $13,000, and you can survive for 3 years.
As long as it comes with an AR-15 rifle, you can survive for 3 years. And lots of ammo.
3 years, my friend. We can lock you up for 3 years.
Well, I think we got a next topic for Colleen and Caddle to go do some research on, actually, while we're thinking of
emergency preparedness with
emergency preparedness. I think that's a really thing. News out there, just last couple of things. News out there about Red Lobster could be change the R with a D, and you wind up with.
Oh my God! Red Lobsters in the Atlantic would close. Oh, wait a second. There are no Red Lobsters in the Atlantic. Oh my God!
You know, I was at my local
Red Lobsters we have in Canada.
It's not a lot. I mean, talk about a name.
25.
I mean,
do you remember how they came into Canada?
Yeah, it was a big deal. Red Lobster was a big deal. Like, and it was
they bought Ponderosa.
That's right. Ponderosa was a big deal. I used to go there for Ponderosa steaks when I was a kid. But I was at my local fishmonger here in Mississauga, which is a fantastic. And I was saying, hey, are you guys going to carry any lobster? And they're like, you know, it's expensive because you got to have tanks and stuff like that. And B, you know, the price is so high now, even at the dock, that it's kind of priced out. So if you're Red Lobster and your brand is basically now associated with an extremely expensive product, I guess it's so expensive because a lot of this is going, you know, is it a supply or demand? So on the supply side, it seems okay. The demand, there seems to be a lot of demand from international demand from places like China. Is that what's driving up lobster prices?
I think, I mean, well, I was talking to a few reporters today about this. I mean, procurement in the seafood industry is a nightmare. You have no idea what's going to happen. So lobster prices are way up. Crab prices are way down. Next year could be the opposite. Like, how do you actually manage your costs when it's always up and down and up and down? And you got scallops, you got salmon, it's just complicated. If you're a steakhouse, you got the trifecta to manage. It's much easier. That's one thing. And of course, these products are really pricey. And so price points are typically higher. And when food inflation is an issue, people will just walk away. And let's be honest here. When you walk into a Red Lobster, you got to like the 80s, you know?
Well, if you walk into the Red Lobster, you're probably bringing your family and you're thinking about an affordable treat, I would say. Unfortunately, I'm not sure even lobster's still on the menu.
But nowadays, if your product doesn't align with values and tastes that is linked to millennials and Gen Zs, you are done. And that's kind of what's going on with Red Lobster.
I would say something about Red Lobster. I mean, if lobster's coming off the coast, whether it's Cape Cod down in the U.S. or whether it's coming off our coast, I have more faith in the people that are actually not slaves making the product. Like, I don't eat a lot of shrimp anymore, for example.
Right.
You know, I switch. I'll have one lobster instead of, I could eat a lot of lobster.
So there are 18, I believe there are 18 Red Lobsters in Ontario. And all the rest are in the prairies where there's plenty of ocean.
Well, they don't get a lot of it. Tells you.
So they tried in BC, they failed, and and I don't know if they tried in the Atlantic, but people buy lobster at Canadian Tire here. Yeah, like, seriously. One last thing. Shout out to mustard farmers. Subway Canada has saved yellow mustard. They did discontinue, according to some chats I had with a few employees at Subway, they discontinued yellow mustard, but it's back since last week.
Power of the people. Power of the people.
Oh, yeah.
Since we're on to one last thing, let's do one more thing. What are you thinking? What do you think about pizza at Tim Hortons? Pizza, my God. Let's not call it innovative because it's like the most readily available product. You think it'll be successful for them? I know they're trying to shift day parts and do things like that, but what do you think?
So when I spoke to people at Subway about the yellow mustard, and I asked them, why didn't you make any announcements about discontinuing yellow mustard? And of course, I responded to my own question. Well, franchises just don't brag about when they discontinue products. It's going to be the same with pizza at Tim Hortons in a few months from now. That's what I think. What do you think? Do you think it's a good idea? I think it's an awful idea.
Well,
I mean, they're back to that plant-based stuff. It's not part of their core thing. I mean,
well, it's their strategy to fill out. I'd say three things.
They want to get people for lunch and dinner. I get that. I get that. But seriously, look at what if McDonald's can't make it happen.
Yeah,
Tim Hortons can't either. I'm sorry.
I would only say maybe we get somebody from Tim Hortons on. They've tested it, and they wouldn't be rolling it out if there wasn't already some sense of consumer adoption. Because I read the article. They said we started with spicy. People didn't want spicy. So let's assume that a company that big has tested and said, you know what? We think this will have a chance of success. So
it's a complementary item. I see it as like a group sort of savior item, because you'll get a bunch of people coming in for sandwiches and soup, and by the way, I want to eat pizza.
Remember when McDonald's did it and they couldn't fit it through the drive-through window?
I know.
Hopefully they got that figured out.
And that was McDonald's. Yeah.
Hey, listen, this stuff is complex, and we're all people too, and we wish everybody the best of luck, and congratulations if you're a lobster fisherman, you're going to actually make some money. So God bless you.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Or maybe you should start your own franchise. You know,
maybe. Maybe. All right. Well, this has been an action-packed episode. Next week, you may have seen in the social media, Sylvain, you promoted Uncle Bob's Popcorn this week. We actually pushed that to next week. So we will have Tanner
Popcorn.
We actually, as if we rehearsed this, but we actually said, let me have some popcorn on Saturday and see if indeed, and he makes some pretty big, bold promises about the quality of the product. So I'm going to test it on the weekend, and we'll see. And you know how I'm going to test
dental floss.
I'm going to watch the movie Food Inc. 2.
Oh.
So I'm going to watch that on the weekend. So we'll do a little movie review next week for Food Inc. 2.
Yes, that's a good idea, actually. Yes.
So you watch it this weekend, I watch it this weekend. How about that? And then we'll talk about it next week.
Cool.
Almost like we plan these things. But there you go. I'm Michael Blanc, podcaster, media entrepreneur, consumer growth consultant, keynote speaker. And you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
All right, everybody. Safe travels. Enjoy your week, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Take care.